Folks, we need to call to order in less than a minute, so if we can get prepared to do so. Okay, I have 4 o'clock, so if we could please call the legal committee of the Roswell City Council to order. This is Thursday, March 25th, 2021, and like I say, it is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And could we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Stubbs?
Here.
Counselor Peterson is absent today. Counselor Perry?
Here.
Counselor Foster?
Here.
Madam, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We do have a quorum. Can we get an approval of the agenda, please?
Madam Chair, I'm going to make a motion to approve the agenda with one change, please, that I caught under regular item number 1, sub line D, Associated Press Incorporated, that is a lease at the RAC. I thought that was going to be Associated Records, but I just found out the name has changed even from that. So the name is actually Information Protection Services. So D on the agenda will read Information Protection Services, and that will change as well on the actual abstract and everything else on pages 14 and all. Okay?
Thank you. Good. We have a motion and a second to accept the agenda with that one change to the name of 1D. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And no, same sign? Okay, motion carries. Great. We have the minutes of the regular legal committee meeting that we held last month on Thursday, February 25th, 2021. Are there any questions, comments, concerns with what's written?
No, ma'am.
Okay, hearing none, then they will be accepted as written. Thank you. So let's get into our regular items. We have 4 items from the Roswell Air Center, 4 leases. Mr. Stark?
Good afternoon, Councilor. We'll start with Patricia Rodak. This would be a 1-year lease commencing on May 1st for Building 117. It's about 4,736 square feet. The monthly cost would be $597 a month with an annual cost of $7,064 per month. Stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this lease? This is a new lease, as you said.
Yeah, this is a new lease. It's actually probably not going to go the full year, but this was Kerry Hunter's building.
Oh,
so
okay.
Patty's taken over this to deal with his belongings.
Okay, Thank you for explaining that. Any other questions or comments? Can I get a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we send to full council on the consent agenda, the approval, for approval of lease with Patricia Rodak for building number 117, consisting of 4,736 square feet, more or less, located at the Roswell Air Center, to commence May 1st of 2021, ending April 31 of 2022, and the rent amount of $7,164 and no cents, payable in 12 monthly installments of $597, and see are subject to all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Second. The motion and a second. Any questions about this lease on Building 117? Hearing none, then, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Mr. Scott?
Okay, the second lease is for Kurt Becker to lease T-Hanger 120, that, space 4, and that's an 1,175 square foot T-Hanger for 1 year, beginning May 1st. The monthly rate would be $205. The annual rate would be $24.60. Stand for questions.
Thank you. This also is a new lease, is that, or this
Correct.
is a new lease?
This is a new lease.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or concerns about Kurt Becker's leasing of Building 120, Space 4?
What lease is leaving us for this one to pick up there?
120-4 has actually been empty for a while. Cliff Wade was in it last, and we used it temporarily during Hangar 91 when the roof blew off. So we put airplanes in there for a while, and then when it cleared out, we started trying to market it again. It just took a while. So it's been empty for close to a year.
Okay. Anything else? Motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we send to full council for the consent agenda on the April meeting. The consideration of approval for new lease with Kurt Becker for building number 120, space 4, consisting of 1,175 square feet, more or less, at the Roswell International Air Center, commencing on May the 1st, 2021, ending on April 30th, 2022, in the amount of $2,460 and no cents, payable in 12 monthly installments of $205. Is this just for 1 year, or does it have extension considerations? Just 1 year?
It's just
1 year,
Okay.
yes.
Subject to all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on Building 120, Space 4 lease. Any other questions or comments? This would go on the consent agenda. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. That will be on the consent agenda in April. Our third lease is with Christopher Lynn. This also is in Building 120?
That's correct. Mr. Lynn would like to lease T-Hanger 120. This is a new lease for space 1, consisting of 1,175 square feet. Also a 1-year lease, starting May 1st, $205 a month, $24.60 annually.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? A motion, please?
I guess just one
which?
question. Are we looking at now with these T-hangers just doing 1-year leases and not looking at, or have we done that in the past?
We've always done 1 year.
Okay, I could not remember how often we have those coming back, so, okay. I make a motion that we send to full council on the consent agenda for the April meeting, the new lease with Chris Lynn for T-Hanger number 120, space 1, consisting of 1,175 square feet, more or less, located at the Roswell Air Center, commencing on May the 1st, 2021, ending April 30th of 2022, in the amount of $2,460 and no cents, payable in 12 monthly installments of $205, subject to all the terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on Building 120, Space 1. Any other questions or comments? concerns? This will go on the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll see this on the April agenda. If I'm not mistaken, this leaves us with no more T-hangers, is that?
That is correct. They're all full now.
Is there a waiting list, just out of curiosity?
There's not.
Oh, no waiting list and
No
all
waiting
full?
list. We've broken even. So
That's good.
probably just to flesh out the story a little bit, a couple of years ago, a few years ago, when we did the lease policy, we instituted a $10 fee to get on the waiting list, and that magically took a lot of people off of the waiting list because they weren't serious. So
Interesting.
the ones that were serious stayed on, and we've rotated through that list now, and they're all in hangars.
Okay, interesting. That's good to know they're all leased now. Okay, thank you. We have our fourth lease consideration, which again is not with Associated Records, Inc. It is with Information Protection Services, if I'm not mistaken.
That
Okay,
is correct.
thank you.
And this would be a renewal for Information Protective Services for Building 250, approximately 20,000 square feet. This would be a 5-year term, beginning on May 1st, for $34.18 a month and $41,016 annually, and that's a 3% increase over the current rate.
So I have a question. Under rent, you said the amount, but that's for the first year. And
Correct.
so what happens after that? Is there any increase?
Correct. There's CPI or 3%, whichever is greater.
Okay. And is that true is that included in this first year or not?
We did a 3% increase from the last lease to this one.
Okay, so
So-
this
Correct.
is a 3% and the
Correct.
next, whatever, the other 4 years will be CPI or 3?
Yeah, 3%
Great.
or more if CPI is higher.
Great. Okay, appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Can I get a motion on
Excuse
Building
me, Madam
250?
Chair. I do have one question.
Sure.
What shape is this building in? Is it fairly good shape, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in good shape.
Because when we were talking about it, and I know, I mean, we're eventually trying to move up on costs and everything, but when you figure this out, it's what, $2 a square foot?
Yeah, a little bit over.
So, and we're trying to move those levels up, and I see we're doing it by 3%, but, all right, well, that was my question. Or do we maintain this building, or do they do the maintenance on it?
They do the maintenance.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, yes.
If I can
Councilor
ask
Berg.
one question as well, I know that part of the land sale agreement to
Gone.
Aragon, there was going to be a new road constructed, a new Jennifer Lane, if you would. Where are we at on that?
So we're still waiting on the FAA to give us the release on the land. I talked to FAA yesterday. I think we're in the last portion of what they're doing. They had some questions over the appraisals, why we did 2, those type of things. So more to come is probably the best answer I can give you right now. They've got a meeting that was going to happen either today or early next week where they'll discuss my answers I gave them yesterday and then get back to me. But I think we're probably really with the Federal Register notice, we're a week or 2 out from a decision from them, if they don't need anything else from us. And then the Register notice, I think, is 30 days. So we're getting closer.
And if we are, and I think it already was, but I don't drive by this place an awful lot. Southeast Wells, we already have that permanently shut down, correct?
Yes, it is blocked off.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Could I get a motion
okay.
then, please?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we send to full council for the April meeting for the consent agenda, the consideration of approval of the renewal of the contract with information, the lease with information protection services on building number 250, consisting of 20,000 square feet, more or less, grounds and dock areas located at the Roswell Air Center, and commencing May 1 of 2021, ending May 30 of 2026, unless sooner terminated by provisions hereof, in the amount of $41,016.00, payable in 12 monthly installments of $3,418 the first year of the lease, and with an increase of 3% or CPI, whichever is greater, subject to all the terms and conditions of the lease.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for this to be on the consent agenda in April. Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Do you have someone to introduce to us?
I do.
Oh,
Mr. Steve Christopher, come on down. So, as you know, we did a long search for both the property manager and for the deputy director positions, and both have been filled. My new property manager, Denise Garcia, starts tomorrow. But Steve's been here now. This will be his 4th week, and I'm excited to have him. We've had a lot of discussions. I'm helping him drink from the fire hose at this point. So he shadows me everywhere I go and trying to teach him as much as I know. I really think that shouldn't take long, but it's taking longer than I thought it would. But very, very pleased with his performance so far. I think he's going to be a big help to the Air Center, a great addition to the team. With that, I'll let him talk about himself a little bit.
Good afternoon, Steve Christopher. Like Mr. Stark said, I've been here a 4th week now, so I haven't met any surprises yet that I haven't in any other projects I've worked on. So Councilman Perry knows, he was in on the interview, so, and I'll give him my background. But basically, I've got a strong background in business development, economic development, prior military, prior law enforcement. So all of my experiences have come together. So it's, like I said, it's going to be a good challenge.
good. Well, welcome to Roswell.
Thank you.
We'll get to know you as you get more involved. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to it.
Good.
Madam Chair, he's not telling all about himself. He's spent a significant amount of time up in Alaska, working with airports up in Alaska, and so I think he's going to be able to bring some of that expertise. Just keep the muck tuck at home, if you will.
Yeah, no worries on that.
All right, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is number 2 on our agenda. It's an ordinance. This is its first reading for intergovernmental agreements. And Mr. Nebb, I believe this is yours. No? Oh, well, maybe you could team tag. I'm sorry, is Parker going to?
I'll say a couple words to introduce it, and then if you have questions, I'm sure that Mr. Nebb will
Okay.
be better at answering them than me.
Go ahead, thank you.
Okay, this is sort of a little bit of a novel concept for us right now, so we'll try and explain it. Right now, the city provides services to the surrounding communities outside of the city limits. The 2 biggest ones probably are law enforcement support and then fire and rescue, but there are other services that we do. The city also receives benefits from other governmental entities. When we request aid from them, they will come in and help us. The city considers it one of its most, important functions to go out and support the surrounding communities and protect the health, safety, and welfare of the whole of Chavez County. It, benefits us back within the city. Currently, the city does have some scattershot agreements with different governmental entities, mutual aid agreements out there. They're not real consistent and they're not real comprehensive. And in addition, there's not always a match between what may be in older agreements and what we're actually doing in practice now. And so the concept was to have us go back and look at what we're doing with all of this and have a comprehensive approach. So this proposed ordinance would basically mandate and require us to go and enter into these intergovernmental agreements to address mutual aid between the city of Roswell and different entities, Chavez County, different cities, and even potentially the state or the federal government, depending on how that plays out. The purpose here, like I said, is to kind of try and standardize our procedure and have the same kind of system with regard to all the different entities and regularize our process. And one of the big issues that we want to look at is cost recovery. You know, when we go out beyond the city limits and provide services, or when other jurisdictions might come back for us, when you're providing that out-of-jurisdiction service, that becomes a subsidy or a disproportionate burden on the taxpayers of this jurisdiction, because they obviously pay for that. And so the idea is that everybody should pay their way in terms of the services that they're receiving. The other aspect of this that I think would behoove us to address is going to be the allocation of risk and liability, because, you know, when we go out there, it exposes us to additional risk every time we go out there. And I'll tell you that as someone who used to do a lot of plaintiff's work, it is the practice of a plaintiff's attorney to basically sue everybody that they can think of and see what shakes out. And I don't say that to disparage plaintiff's attorneys. Like I said, I used to be one. But in fact, the way the law works, it's almost malpractice not to do that, because of the rule of comparative fault. If you leave anybody out and they're somewhat responsible, that's money that you don't collect for your client. And so just by the fact that Roswell may send officers out to help a surrounding community will cause them to be drug into lawsuits, whether there's liability there on our part or not. And then we're also seeing with the recent legislation that's coming out of Santa Fe, the potential of an expanded level of potential liability, scope, and extent. And so I think that part of what we may want to do in looking at how we're providing these services is to address, you know, whether it's insurance or however we're doing it, you know, how we're covering ourselves and who's bearing the risk there. And so that's kind of the concept behind this, this ordinance. And, you know, we'll open it up for questions. I do have lots of people here if you have questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I may add just a little more piece to that as well, too. Because one of the things when we started looking at, again, I look at this more as a housekeeping thing. It is having the city council tell us, yes, we want to enter into these MOUs, these agreements and everything, and this is the process. A lot of this information comes from the incident command system that's at the federal level, and it kind of works its way down through there. Mr. Patterson covered a lot of those good pieces in there. The other one that I would like to share and add into this whole mix as to why we're looking at that as well as too, is that public safety is a very important business for everybody in Chavez County and everybody around. When the city responds outside of its boundaries, and we don't build to respond outside the boundaries, but we're here to help if we need to. But when we respond outside, it all works just fine until it doesn't. And what I'm saying is that if there's too many incidents happening at the same time, we're going to take care of our immediate responsibility, our primary responsibility to the city. That means that if we don't respond out to a call that is outside of our boundaries at some point in time, I'm a little afraid that because they get too comfortable with utilizing us, that they're not building their public safety in order to keep the protection outside the city as well. And so I want to make sure that I add that piece to it, because I think liability is a big one, especially with the qualified immunity, that all those different pieces there. When we respond outside of the city, because our boundaries are the city limits for our groups. Now, we have MOUs with everybody. We're able to respond out there, but we should be responding based upon their inability to complete what their responsibilities are. Our people will go to make sure that everybody's taken care of. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that we have both of the chiefs here. We've talked about this in great detail, and that, you know, I think the worst thing we have is that we have MOUs that are from years previous that are not up to date with what actually is happening now. There's a couple of MOUs out there that we can't even find a document anymore out of either party, and so cleaning this up is really what we want to make sure that it does, and so that we have a whole system in place in order to get there.
Good.
I'll answer any questions as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Counselor Foster.
Well, I know in the past, our SWAT team responds to pretty much anywhere in southeastern New Mexico. At that point, in the past, what insurance is covering them? Is it still our insurance, or when we're responding to Lincoln County, or if we're going down to JOW, or, I know we've gone pretty far with our SWAT, because we're one of the only SWAT teams in this area.
Right, and I can lean on the chief a little bit if necessary, but the SWAT team is generally called out by the other agency, so I would assume that there is some coverage with that. I'm getting the head shaking, so yes. Now, the drug task force is one that is identified kind of separately.
Right.
And so it has different responsibilities based upon how it was created. But, yeah, so the SWAT, that's how they handle the SWAT.
Because I know we've gone to many different jurisdictions on
Yes.
that one, and so that's where I was wondering. And also with our recent legislation that's passed with the immunity, we want to make sure that we have this. And so, so would this be taking care of that? Would we start having these agreements with Lincoln County, with Ruidoso, with JOW, or with all, before we went out?
What this ordinance does, it establishes the process as to how we would do the MOUs. Then we would go out, we would enter into an MOU with these agencies in that manner. It just depends on if we need that MOU or not. I mean, there's a lot of different public safety legs that we can land on. We just want to make sure that we're called to service, essentially, is what I want to call it, is that I want them to say, we need your help, please come help us.
All right, I yield.
Thank you. Counselor Perry? Okay. Just a few things. Of course, I've wordsmithed it, and you didn't put my name in here. You said it would be checked by the city attorney, and you should have put my name in it, too.
I believe you deserve your own line on that thing.
No, so just, and if you all don't mind, that doesn't change the meaning, if I could just get with them instead of doing it right now.
Yep.
Good. But I do have a question about, okay, so I thought this was originally just in Chaves County, but you're saying we go as far as, or outside of Chaves County as well?
We have actually served, depending on the incidents and accidents on the highway, we've served all the way up past Vaughn.
Okay.
And so I think that the nice thing is that the whole incident command system that the federal government has created, and that it allows for a lot of this stuff to move, so we're able to help where we can. We always help based upon making sure that we still have our services covered back here.
Right.
But that's where we want to try to identify that. But we'll respond where the need is, I believe, anywhere in this region.
Good, okay. So when you're talking about an MOU, there'll be pricing associated with it? Somehow you're going to figure out a cost recovery, and I think it mentions in here whether it be by hour or by project or
Yeah, essentially, and this document actually, so you won't hurt my feelings wordsmithing it, because it came from Sandoval County.
I was going to say it came from somewhere.
And so we just kind of mirrored it because it's already been discussed in New Mexico.
Good.
And so it fit all of those different criteria. So wordsmithing it is good.
Okay,
What I liken it to, I guess, if you're going to look at the cost recovery or setting those methods, and do understand that this says that we can waive those fees as well, too, depending on what the incident is. So the ability is within this agreement as how we go through that, but I would call it essentially a time and material incident. And so if we have to respond outside, then we're going to cover our time and material outside of the city. Conversely, if we invite anybody in for the time and material, and we've asked for additional help, then they would come in and we would cover their time and material as well, too. So it won't be set specifically on a fee structure,
okay,
but it'll be set based upon that, based upon what that service is being provided. If they provide us 4 firefighters or 2 police officers that come in to help do whatever that is, that's how we would handle it.
okay. And then I do have a question that I'd like to talk about on page 19 of the packet, section 4, cost recovery in event of non-payment. And I'm looking at B or it's line 9. And I'm just curious, maybe it works this way, but this says that each one of these agreements will be approved by the governing body. And then down in section 6, delegation of authority, line 38, it says that the authority to negotiate is granted to the city manager designee.
We should clean
Is
that
that
up.
not a conflict, or is that different?
I distinguish the ability to negotiate in the final approval of the agreement. So
Okay,
I see
so-
that as, he's got to create what the document is and what the terms are, and then we would bring it forward. That's the
Okay,
distinction.
so that's really not unusual. That's the way things are typically done anyway.
Right.
And so it would be up to the city manager to locate all these people, I guess, and start the ball rolling with that discussion.
City manager or designee. I
Right.
mean, again, I rely heavily upon our chiefs as well, too.
Good.
In order to develop out the negotiated terms of any MOU, and then we would bring that forward. Very similar to what we do with the RFPs for contracts.
Okay, so basically, yeah, okay. So like I say, my others are wordsmithing, so I won't take
Yeah.
time. Yes, Counselor Foster?
One of the questions I have on that is, and I've read it, but then I'm going back to like we said, we have double, wording in there. But also, will this hinder our ability to do it quickly in case? I mean, I understand there's our history of where we've worked with governments, and we can go through and ahead of time. Let's say we haven't worked with, say, Elida, and they suddenly need help. Would this hinder us being able to render help?
My answer to that would be no.
Yeah, I don't think
It
so.
will not, it will not make it any difficult, but what we do want to have in place are these protections for all parties involved if it's a more regular occurrence.
Okay. And I understand a lot of this is also, can be set up to the point where it's incident and emergency management to the degree that if we're asking for help, we've got something big happening, and probably going to end up having federal funds coming in to help pay for it, and then this is a way we can,
That recognizes that as well. Yes, sir.
and pay that out. So, so I understand that. So, and that was my major thing. I don't want to tie our hands to the point where we can't render aid in a process and make it slow down in an emergency. So, thanks.
Right, and I don't think the intent of this is to stop us from doing it ever. It's rather to set a procedure for doing it, but it's not going to ever stop us from going out and doing that.
Mr. Matthews, did you have a comment? It was just answered, I think. Okay, thank you.
We did good then, that's why.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Anything the chiefs want to say about this, or?
You guys want to?
We got a thumbs up from you guys?
Mike couldn't handle it.
Just to give you an idea, good afternoon, councilors, Madam Chair. I went through this afternoon and found all the MOUs, JPAs, everything I could locate for all that. Just to read them off to you real quick. Of course, we have our ambulance contract. We negotiate that. You'll be talking about that a little bit later on your agenda. But for many, many, many years, the county's paid us a fee for what was called rescue services that we provided. And back in my younger days, that service was because we were the only ones that owned a set of Jaws of Life. So we were contracted, we were paid $20,000 a year to respond to all the county car accidents, extricate people out of vehicles and stuff. Today, we still receive that same $20,000. We don't have an agreement for that. We submit an invoice every year, they send us a check, and that's the way it's always been done. So really trying to tie these things down, evaluate those services. I'm sure it's changed over the years, the cost of doing business like that. So that's part of this. We have mutual aid agreements with Dexter and Hagerman. We have joint powers agreements for homicide and violent task force between the district attorney's office, Chaves County SO, and the Roswell Police Department. We have MOU with Chaves County for the Metro Narcotics Task Force, SOMPD, a joint powers agreement between the University for Police and Fire Services, joint powers agreement for, of course, PBRCC, where we split that 60-40 for operational expenses with the county. And of course, we have animal control agreement for the first time with the county for our animal services. So it's really taken all these different agreements because we have some verbiage on some agreements and some we don't. But just trying to get everything together so they're easily managed. We don't miss deadlines. We don't miss when we need to renew them. We need to negotiate them. To go back to answer your question on if we receive a call for if somebody needs assistance, what we do usually in the summertime a lot up in say Redoso, they'll have a forest fire or something. They'll call request resources from us. It's a phone call, usually a phone call from the chief to myself or to Joe saying, hey, we're getting a request. Absolutely. If we have the personnel, send the help. We'll figure out after it's all over what we need to do to make this right. Many of our, when we receive like hazmat funding and stuff, if we have a tight team through the state, we get funding for that, but part of that agreement is that we provide that service in our region. So each of those would have to be considered separately because of the criteria that comes with it as being a typed resource and receiving that funding. Just to give you an idea, I hope that don't make it more confusing, but.
Madam Chair, I'd just say that it seems to me this just brings complete transparency and clarity to, you know, a very confusing issue. And so I appreciate this.
Yeah, I do.
I think that when it came through and trying to read it, this being something sort of new to me to really try to chew on and understand, the more y'all are speaking about it brings clarity to me. So I think that is definitely going to be beneficial.
I just think the key point, if anybody calls during an emergency situation and they're requesting services for us, if we have the ability to provide that service, we're going to provide that service. Always have, and I say it's always doing that.
Appreciate that. Yes.
Okay. Well, and with the move that they had to get rid of qualified immunity and stuff, I like the idea of us having arrangements prior. I mean, I understand emergencies, but if we can go out and get arrangements prior, and then when our personnel go into harm's way and get their necks stuck out, and we have agreements with them. I don't like the idea of, I mean, we're going to help people when we need to help people, but I don't like to send them and then something happens, and then they say, oh, by the way, no, we really didn't want that much help, or we didn't want that. That's when something happens in that, our people get stuck, their necks get stuck out, and I would much rather have an agreement in place prior to it. So I like this.
Thank you. Good. Any other questions or comments?
Councilor Stubbs, I would just say that per our conversation a little bit, this better helps me to understand the clarity about tribal and different things as well. If there's a situation up in Mescalero.
I just cleaned up.
No, but I appreciated that we spoke about that, and this helps to understand that a little better, yes.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Chief.
I will be brief. I just wanted to add some information on this because naturally, myself and Chief Miller are obviously watching the legislation closely. And the thing I want to point out is, yeah, the Roswell Police Department has always jumped the line to help people out, and we're actually compelled as public servants in public safety to do such. But what you should understand about this legislation is it was designed supposedly to for police, to reform police. But I want you to understand that this doesn't hit the individual officer, fireman, sanitation worker. This hits the municipality. This hits them up to $2 million. It's a haymaker for somebody in the legal profession, aside from our counsel here who is outstanding. But he'd probably agree. I also want to point something out is when we do our mutual aid effects, I will guarantee you that Roswell is the most qualified person on the scene when we go into the county, and we are thereby going to be held accountable. They're not going to look anywhere else. They're going to say Roswell should have known better. So we need to have these standards put in place because we are the entity that's leaving our jurisdiction to provide help, and that is what they're going to use to stand on when they come after us. The city is in the county, so the reverse isn't as strong and impactful because they're still staying within their jurisdiction as well as the state police. When we go into the county, we are exposed. And I speak on behalf of, as you do, our taxpayers, because our taxpayers will be held for something that may have happened in Lake Arthur where we were called out there, and if something goes wrong, it's the taxpayers in the city of Roswell that are going to be held on the hook. I want to make sure I had it. All right, I just wanted to make sure you understood that it wasn't the individual. And you know what the funny thing is this legislation doesn't do anything different. If an officer or a fire worker or anybody had, and they operate outside the confines of their job, they don't have any immunity anyways. So this doesn't do anything. What it does, though, is it's going to make your municipal insurance very conscious of what's going on. Your premiums may go up, or they may abandon the city of Roswell or any city within Mexico. That's all I wanted to say. I wanted to give you some good news.
Thanks. Chief Miller?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and councilors. Mike and Joe did a really good job on explaining this, but one thing I did decide I wanted to add, basically kind of adding to what Mike was saying about the MOUs that we have. A lot of them are old and out of date, like the $20,000 that the county provides for the medical rescue services. From what I can tell, researching and looking back, somewhere back in the day when that MOU would have been agreed upon between the city and the county, that $20,000, back in that time frame, we were probably averaging about 3,600 calls a year total. In 2020, 19, 20, and 21, now we're up to averaging just under 10,000 calls a year. 17% of those end up being medical and/or fire calls into the county. And when I got to looking those up and breaking them down and actually seeing how much we actually do end up responding into the county and other areas, it is fairly significant. It's a pretty big cost on us to keep providing the same service here in town for our community. So,
Thank you, appreciate
thank you.
that information, appreciate you guys being involved in this. Any other? Okay, I just need to ask the committee if you're okay with a recommendation, even though you haven't seen my wordsmithing. Do you trust my words?
I think that if it's wordsmithing, I don't think I have an issue with that, do you, Councilor
I don't either.
Foster?
Okay.
I don't think you're going to be changing anything with,
You don't know.
maybe I've changed my mind.
Okay. This does need, obviously, to go to full council for a public hearing, since it is an ordinance. Is there anyone else that wanted to address us on this particular issue of this agreement? Ordinance? No? Okay. I guess we're ready for a recommendation then.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we can,
Please.
make a motion to consider recommending to authorize to advertise to hold a public hearing and consider adoption of an ordinance requiring intergovernmental agent agreements for mutual aid, ordinance 21XX mutual aid IGAs, to be added to the April full city council agenda.
12, I think.
April 12th? Okay. Sure.
No, the 8th.
8th, yeah, 8th. Okay, that's why I didn't say it.
Well, forgive me, but my dad's birthday was the 12th, but my sister's is the 8th, and so that's why I got them confused. Is there a second?
12th, 8th, 2nd. There you go.
No, let's not wait that long.
That's a second.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments about this motion to send the resolution on mutual aid to full council, recommending a public hearing and approval? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, so we'll see this a couple more times. Thank you all for the work you've put into this. Okay. Next, we have item number 3, I guess, which is possible amendments to our consent agenda resolution. Counselor Best has joined us for the discussion, so appreciate that. Parker, an introduction?
Sure, yeah. As everybody knows, Resolution 2366 established the consent agenda process. Since then, it's been amended twice that I was able to find. one in 2014, and then one that I was also involved in as the deputy city attorney, which was Resolution 1938. In both of those resolutions, the number and types of things that can be added to the consent agenda were expanded. And in fact, in the 19 resolution, basically anything that you want, unless it's prohibited by law or an ordinance, you can put on consent. So the reason why I brought this forward is, recent events have caused a lot of discussion about the consent agenda, and so I'm not recommending particularly anything, but I produced a proposed ordinance, or resolution, that kind of highlighted the new items that are in addition to the original things that were on 2366 as kind of to kind of get everybody thinking about it. And so the questions are too many things going to consent? Should we scale back the number of things going to consent? And if so, how much? And so I kind of open it up.
Thank you. And if I could take just a little bit of privilege right here. In 1997, I'm the one that really wrote the consent agenda that first came to the council then, and Parker has included it in here, which I really appreciate if I find it. As you can see, the original resolution had only 4 items on it, and the purpose of those items were they were typical. There was no real change in them, and it slowed up, or it speeded up. All right. It made it go quicker. Thank you. Made the meeting go much quicker, so that was the reason for those. And as noted in the resolution, these were items that were normal, I guess, typical items. I'm not choosing my words very well here. But I think the concern that I have over what's been happening with this resolution the past several months is that consent isn't 9 people, it isn't 8 people. Consent has to be 10 or everyone present, and the intent of this resolution was certainly not to damper, God, I'm not thinking correctly, the discussion on items. I think the intent, again, was to get through the quick things, the regular things, pretty quickly, and then certainly give the ability to discuss anything that needed to be discussed by pulling it from the consent agenda. These 4 items, let me just real quickly, the minutes of the previous meeting, again, in Robert's rules, they haven't changed it. If they're not on consent, you read them at the meeting and then approve them. So, again, whether that's necessary or not, I see you didn't scratch that one, so that one's, in our opinion, is still there. The Roswell Air Center leases, again, usually have gone through the scrutiny, and there's really no question for council, I don't think, typically, to make any changes to that. So that's why that's there. The same is true with bids and RFP awards. There's state statute, and I think maybe even some ordinances that pretty well give us the guidance as to what to do there. So those are there. And the same with the weed and condemnation resolutions. Again, those are not necessarily need any kind of discussion, so that's why those were there. We can go through the list of the ones that have been added, but I just, for me personally, I guess I just want to say, and then I want comments from the committee and anyone else, is that when an item's on consent, I don't always have the opportunity to hear the discussion that may be going on about it, and I like that discussion. It always helps me form my opinion on it, and so that's why I think I personally am a little concerned about putting all this on consent. I realize it takes a lot more time if we don't, but I also think that that's what our constituents elected us to do, is to spend time on the decisions that we're making. So I will ask the other committee members and Councilor Best to make comments, and let's figure out what we want to do. Go ahead, Councilor Foster.
All right, well, I was on the committee, and when we went through and added most of the ones that were added, and I don't like the fact that the statement that, you know, if it's not heard by the people, because we all our committee meetings are videotaped, we have it all on. I know you watch them and you listen to all the committee meetings too, and so there's nothing that in this that actually hides. But we'd had a discussion earlier, Counselor Stubbs, that I agree with. The only thing that's hidden is when someone pulls something off. I don't agree that it can be pulled off other than in a meeting, because it's put on in a meeting, and I think it should be pulled off in a meeting. So that is one of the sticklers that I have a hard time with, because that is not in the public realm of who asked for what to be pulled off and why. And so I do think that when we get down to it, that they need to be pulled off at the city council level, not because I send an email wanting something off. But I do think, I agree with why we put all these on. And with the ability for any counselor to pull it off, I agree, with that. But I think that they need to do it in a public fashion. But I also think that I don't like us tying our hands. And when we have the ability to put something on consent, we can put it on consent. If an RFP or a bid is $1 million bid, or we may even say $100,000, we might have a dollar amount that we're more comfortable going ahead and putting it on the open meeting and agreeing with it, because it's a significant sum of money. But if it's a $100 bid to, put up a sign or something, I'm not sure that's due all 10 of the council and the time at city council. I mean, if we had a question about it, yes, but if there's some things, if you look at the school board and their consent, if they had to go through and read their consent, they'd have 24-hour meetings, because they have every single bill that's paid through the school district, to the point of water for East Grand Plains is on their consent agenda. So if we had to read every single one of those, it would be forever. And if we had to read all our bills, we'd be in a council meeting for many hours. And so anything that limits our ability to be more efficient. And I think that taking these off, there's a reason why we put them on, and that was to make us more efficient, not to hide anything. And so I'm really against any of these changes. So, thank you.
Counselor, if I could ask you, we don't have on or off the consent agenda the approval of all bills and that sort of thing. We don't do that.
I'm not saying we do, but I said the school district, they have it on their consent. I'm not saying we have to, but what I'm saying is there's a reason why we have consent. And the reason why lodger's tax was taken off, because we were spending hours discussing $500 lodger's tax allocations. And if we had a question about it, we could bring it back. But a lot of times, there was no need for the discussion. And so that's where I see that, going back to what it was when you wrote it, I understand why we wrote it to start with, but we added these because we needed more efficient. We didn't like going into 12:30 meetings, or getting out at 12:30, and these made us more efficient. We still can pull all of them off if we need to, but I have a problem with limiting what we can put on. Why would the council ever look at limiting to what they can do? It doesn't make sense to me.
See, Counselor, I don't look at it that way. I look at, 1, 2, 3, like the fourth whereas in this resolution that we're looking at. Certain routine, non-controversial matters could be resolved by placing those matters on the consent agenda.
Right.
And some of the things you just mentioned, that's why they don't go on the consent agenda, is because they need discussion.
But saying you can't put a lodger's tax item on consent agenda, not allowing us to put it on there if it's not controversial, is wasting our time. That's what I'm saying. So if we don't have it that we can put a lodger's tax item on consent, it can't go on consent. Am I correct in saying that? If this line's not there, lodger's tax items can't go on consent.
Yeah.
It depends.
Well, I think as it's written, it's a list of specific things that are permissible on consent, and now we've added basically anything. So if you took that off, then it would no longer be eligible for consent. It's how I'm reading the resolution right now.
So if it's non-controversial, why make it go on the regular agenda? And that's what you're doing by taking this off.
Lodger's tax is not, funding is non-controversial?
There can be certain things that are non-controversial. But you're saying everything that we spend at lodger's tax is controversial? And that we need to discuss it at council?
I'm not necessarily saying it's non-controversial. I think I'm saying that it needs to be discussed, as you were saying, in an open meeting where everyone, not just the 4 current members on the committee, are present to discuss it.
Everything that goes on consent is discussed in an open meeting.
True.
So that's where I'm not...
3 or 4 people.
No, thousands. Anybody who wants to.
Well...
Anybody, I can come back and watch this anytime, anywhere. Thousands of people can watch and consider the debate. And that's where limiting the city council to only certain items is not good practice.
See, and I look at it as opening it up. As opposed
It's already
to
open. We already discussed 90% of this stuff already, don't we? Because one counselor decides to pull it off. It can be open.
Well-
But taking this away limits our ability to put things on. That's where I'm saying. And am I correct?
I can't comment on whether that's correct or not in my mind.
Taking this away doesn't limit, we can't, if you take lodger's tax funding requests off this, we can't put it on consent. So that's limiting what we can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have to agree with that, but that's not the way I'm thinking about it.
Well, I'm sorry, but I mean, that's the truth. This is more flexible than, the ability to do it or not do it is more flexible than the ability totally not to be able to put anything on lodgers, or on consent. And that's where I think it gets to that point where, so,
Okay.
I yield.
Counselor Perry, do you have any comments?
I think that, well, a couple of things. One question I have, and this has nothing necessarily to do with the changes, but it looks as if, and I'm just now noticing this because I thought it sort of confusing, it looks as if the mayor signed a draft copy of the resolution 1938. And I'm hoping that's not a norm, so.
Yeah, it has the resolution 19-XX.
So anyway, just a thought that may need to be,
I know.
regardless of what
I
we
noticed
do
that too.
today, that may want to be considered. But I guess I had a question. It looks as if, and I'm just now noticing this because this was done while I was not on council. It looks like, was this in 2019? Yes. During that time when I was not on council, that the NE2 was stricken and put to NE1.
And that was to make it match the governing body rules of order. which have one counselor may pull any item, and this had two. And so when we went back to resolve it, or to revise it, Aaron and I will discuss that and said, well, it should either be one, or it shouldn't be one in one place and two in the other, and that was why it was changed.
Okay. In my mind, I've always thought it always has to take two, because you've got the person wanting it coming off and whoever's making the motion. Actually, it really takes three, because then you got a third that's making a second, unless it's the same person. So the two always made sense to me, so I just needed to.
And Counselor Perry, that's exactly why we wrote it originally with two. It would be the person requesting and the person making the motion.
Okay, all right, that clarifies in my mind, so, okay.
But you're correct, now it says one.
And I think that goes again to the governing body rules, which don't, as we've already talked about, they don't contemplate that y'all are going to do it in the meeting. It's now done prior, and so any one person that goes to Sharon and says, I want to take this off, does it, whereas this is contemplating a procedure that happens in the meeting itself, which, as you say, would take two.
And again, I do agree with Counselor Foster wholeheartedly on, again, the intent was originally to pull it off at the meeting, in an open meeting, where we knew who wanted what and where it was, all of that. And what I'm assuming, and it takes somebody that's been here longer than I have, but the governing rules have it going to the city clerk so that, again, these presentations can be sorted in the right order, which to me is, I'm agreeing with you, that's not an excuse for not doing it in a public meeting, but.
Well, and I was not here either, that's my understanding as well.
We all have a good excuse.
So, but that would require us not to address this document, but, and we've had a lot of talk in a nebulous fashion about the governing body rules, but we'd have to address it there, because that's where that procedure is set out.
Madam
ahead,
Chair, if I could.
Counselor Perry.
It doesn't necessarily have to do with the consent agenda, but it has to do with the discussion we're having now, just maybe for future discussion as well. Yeah, I absolutely, I think that in my mind, I would fight for the right for any counselor to be able to pull anything off the consent agenda, because for me to take that away from a single counselor, I take it away from myself as well. So I want to fight for that right for any of us, regardless if I agree with why it was taken off or not. That is not really none of my concern. I think I have to determine at the end of the day. But I do think that you're correct, that needs to take place in the open forum, in the meeting process. I know that the slides and everything, I don't know, I'm looking at Joe when I say this, I don't know if there's a way to be able to have all of the items in different PowerPoint presentations where you pull up each item when it comes to that time. I personally prefer and would like to see us go back to the day where the person who's making the motion for the agenda item, and then it's seconded, and then the conversation goes back to the person who made the motion. That's the way we did it for so many years, to give brief explanation from the committee standpoint, because it is the council's meeting, and then go to staff. Not that staff is not important, staff's very important, but if there's not massive questions, if there are no questions, there may be the time saved in you know, a 15-minute or 10-minute or whatever it is presentation type, if the council understands it. So but that's a conversation for another day. Concerning the agenda items, the consent agenda item, in my opinion, it has grown quite a bit, but I don't know to where it stops and where it starts. I don't know. I think I have to agree that Councilor Foster's put a good case up, that you know, anything can be pulled. I think that we just have to be very aware as a council that if we allow a significant portion of things to go on to the consent agenda, then none of us should get upset when councilors do start pulling from that consent agenda. Because even if there is just a single question there again on an item, we've got to fight for that right for each of us to be able to not have it just go through. So I think that's where the struggle becomes. If we have it large, then we can't be frustrated or upset or in any kind of circumstance when things are pulled. Whereas if it is a shorter list, there's less of that possibility. So I know Councilor Best is here with us, and so.
That's my job.
No, I know, and I didn't call on her. I just thought maybe you would like to hear from her.
I was,
So
I was waiting
I
for
would like to
both.
maybe hear from her and then make, some decisions.
No, I wanted to hear from you too.
Okay.
So, yes, Counselor Best, your comments, please.
Okay, I knew you wouldn't forgive me, Judy, because I would not let you forgive me, so. Back in 2012, when I started, 90% of everything was on paper. And if you wanted to go to a meeting, infrastructure, which was lands at that time, I think, you had to go into City Hall. Once it was gone, you had to read the minutes. If you were in the public or whatever, we didn't have it conveniently on the internet. We are voted by our constituents, our citizens, to do the job that we do. We don't get paid a lot. Actually, we get paid very little for the meetings that we go to and the grief that we get. But the goal is to make Roswell better. That's what this whole room is. It's the goal to make Roswell better, or they wouldn't be working for the city. They'd be having their own businesses and they'd be doing their own thing. That's it. It's to make our citizens content. On this list, the minutes, I get it. We don't want to read them all off. We know, as a council, that you, Miss Judy, go through everything in wordsmith. That's why you're in legal. That's why you are where you are. We know that Barry does his job in general services, and I do mine in public safety. We each have our own niche that we appreciate. The last legal meeting, I came, I can't remember what it was, I had a beef with it. I came, I did what I needed to do for my citizens. I came to the committee meeting. Today, I'm here at this committee meeting because I don't feel what's being presented is correct. I'm asking the questions that my citizens would ask at the meeting. That's why I'm here. I feel if we pull something off, such as lodgers, let's do lodgers tax. There's two committees that it goes through before it gets to full council. It goes through the public committee that's voted in, I can't remember the name of it.
Occupancy tax board.
Thank you. So it goes through there, then it goes to general services. Then it goes up to full council. If you are doing your job as a counselor, you're going to take that agenda, you're going to sit down, and you're going to read it. If I wasn't at your meeting, I would take the gumption as a counselor, which I'm voted in for, go to YouTube and watch that meeting. If it's only on this specific item, I would watch that. My questions should be answered. If not, then I should be able to pull it off the agenda. All these on here I think are great. I don't think that any counselor should pull it off if they have not gone to the extent to ask the questions to either any of you. I could come to any of you. I'm not doing a quorum or anything like that. I can come to any of you. Barry would explain his position. You would explain your position if I don't have my computer up and running. So I can go anywhere and get any question answered. If I don't like y'all's questions, I can go over here, or I can go over here. I'm doing my due diligence that I have been elected to do and not wasting the time of the public, because I don't know, Jeff, how many are on our meeting today? 2. So there's only 2 people that have enough gumption to turn on their computer, except the ones that may pull it up later. I was looking at some of them, and I'm sorry I didn't bring my paper agenda, but the lodgers tax, I think, can stay where it's at. Approval for RFP and scope of work, that's not our department. That would be Lewis's, whoever else put out the RFP. And we have a lady that's hired to do that. Approval of city support for special events, we already have that in line. We already have people that do that. They're paid to do their job. If they have a problem, they're going to go to Joe. Joe's going to come to us, or he's going to put it in a committee. I just don't see why. And if anything, I think we should add on there, if you pull the item, you should exhaust every avenue to your question. Exhaust it completely. Go to the other counselors, go to the staff members, exhaust everything. And then if you're still not happy, then pull it off. And it's not necessarily because of the hours, it's because of the technology now. If the citizen is that involved in Roswell, they're going to tune in to our page because, let me tell you, our page compared to the county, you can see anything, anywhere, and watch everything that the city does and how much we've improved within the last 2 years. Our technology has just gone crazy. So there's no reason why there's any citizen that cannot be involved in the city council, in the city government, or in the city, period. So I think I've said my piece, unless I see something else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No. Any questions or comments from the committee on Counselor Bess?
I would just say the biggest one that concerns me that maybe someone can clarify and help me to understand is J, any item placed on the consent agenda by motion at the recommending committee, except, of course, ordinance, the authorization to advertise, and also what is prohibited by law. What are those scenarios? I could not understand that one. Out of all of them, I just could not understand what that was.
That was just a catch-all, and because you can't write it so that everything, you know what you're going to hit. But that was, again, also, the only thing that I limited, because I was the I portion of that was mine, because I said ordinances had to at least be read 3 times publicly before it became an ordinance. And so, other than that, it was like just, I mean, it was a catch-all. It doesn't mean that we have to, but giving us the ability to, on a non-controversial item, if there's a memorial or there's something that we just, wanted to put on there, we can put it on there.
Counselor Perry, anything that requires a public hearing, we could not put on the consent agenda by definition. So I think that's probably at least part of the thought behind that. So, like a liquor license, you can't do that by consent agenda.
But the advertising, we could have, but that's what I didn't want, because I thought that we needed it needed to be read out in public so that, and that's why we added that last part of the language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
my thoughts are probably that for today's purposes, our 4th member of our committee is not here. Not that we still have a quorum, but I think that maybe that for this month, maybe this should be just considered a conversational, and nothing considered concrete this
Okay.
month.
I would agree. I'd just like to make the comment that those that have lines through them, which is E through J2, are merely to show what the original resolution was and its intent, and then that these were added, not that I'm not recommending taking specific ones off. I think the intent is just to show what has been added, and so I appreciate the information. I don't know.
Madam Chair, may I say something too? Sure. One of the things that we do need is the international, and I noticed that in the lease, Scott, we still had international, the Roswell International Air Center instead of just the Roswell Air Center. Those things are just housekeeping, but we got to strike those.
Yeah, I did that too, so you're
It
absolutely
might be
right.
easier just put international back in.
And the other question I had for Counselor Best is, what's your feeling on, should the pulling from consent be in a public meeting, or should it be able to be an email?
I think it would help because you're sitting in a committee meeting like this and you're thinking about it. Some of our counselors, not saying all, some of them aren't quick-witted enough, they haven't gone through it, they haven't investigated enough to pull it. I have not a problem with it going through email before the agenda goes out, because that gives me 72 hours to go and investigate. If you read that agenda, it's pulled from consent. If I have a problem with it, I'm going to go to the staff member, I'm going to go to my computer, and I'm going to look at it. Like right now, somebody of the other counselors, one of them is not going to like this, but they weren't here, and they should have read the agenda. Their citizens had given them their vote to go take care of the business for the city. They are not here, they're not sitting in their chair to discuss this with you. Okay, so they're not, so maybe they're looking through space and they're seeing it. I don't have a problem with pulling it 72 hours before, but not after.
Well-
But I want everything exhausted.
The question, though, is to me, is if it's put on consent in an open meeting, my feeling is it needs to come out of consent on a public meeting. Because I think otherwise, it's not
So-
public knowledge of why things are, or who's pulling
So what I
things.
hear you saying is if it doesn't come off consent in here, which it takes the committee member whether she puts it on consent or not, she can
Right.
have everything in her meeting, whether it's the airport things or not, taken off consent in her meeting before it closes.
True.
So, are you telling me if we take it off only in an open meeting, I'm going to be sitting up here Thursday night, it's going to be pulled in an open meeting, and I have no choice, no means to go investigate, go look at the property, whatever it takes, before I have to take a vote and make a management decision? To me, that's wrong. I want my 72 hours to go hunt, search, peck, and ask questions. I'm not going to come in here and sit down and offer to the staff 5 questions that were already answered on YouTube.
Well, my problem is that if it's on consent, you should already have that knowledge too.
You got
Because you're
it in your
voting on
committee
it.
meeting. Yes, you got it in your committee meeting.
But I mean, but if everything that's on consent, we should already be knowing we should have already read through all that. I mean, I know when I get the full agenda, I read through the consent, and 90% of the stuff I already know about, the 10% is what I investigate.
Correct.
But I'm just saying, but my problem with it being pulled off, not in an open meeting, it's a hidden factor that's not public knowledge.
But it's not a hidden factor because it's in your package. Even the consent stuff.
No, the
is-
pulling off is hidden. I don't know 72 hours beforehand what's pulled off. I know when I sit down at the meeting what's been pulled off. I don't,
That's.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, when the city clerk gets it, does she not send it to everybody?
She does. She sends a new agenda to everybody to say, this is
I don't
what it
always
is.
get that one.
No, I don't think she always does. You know, as mayor pro tem, the city clerk forwards me the email where anyone has asked to pull something off. It should be going, if we continue this process, it should be going to all of you, so.
I'd agree to that.
So what you're saying can happen.
But it also needs to be, I think it also needs to be publicly
I agree.
posted somewhere too, because the agenda is publicly posted.
But
Madam
if
Chair,
she,
I'm sorry.
if she does that, if the counselor does it 72 hours before, when the agenda has to be posted to the newspaper or whatever, Sharon can add, these items were pulled from consent.
It's posted 7 days before, correct?
In that 72 hours?
No.
It's required by law to be 72 hours,
Oh.
but the city clerk typically does it much earlier than that.
Well, then let the city decide when it can be pulled or not. But if you pull it in a committee, that doesn't give any of the other counselors a chance. I mean, of course, you'll argue at it during council, but I want to go investigate. I did not investigate anything on this agenda before I came. You know why? Because I trust you guys.
Right.
Put
but-
here for a reason, and I trust you to do your job. If I have a question, I'm going to come in. Or call in.
Okay, let's.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm just
We're
thinking
off.
we're not going to make a decision on this right now. So I think it's been interesting, this conversation, and we'll continue it at some point. Counselor Perry, did you have
No,
something?
I think because no decision's going to be made today. I do have a couple of questions, but I've written them down, and I'll ask Parker later. That'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. So if everyone's okay, we'll just leave it for now and do something sometime with it at some point.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next item is number 4, which is the telecommunications tower lease. Mr. Miley, are you on the phone? If he is, this is the second time he sat through one of these lengthy discussions.
We
Were
thought
you
he was
going to
going to
call
be.
him? Scott, are you calling him, or were you?
Yeah, I'm texting.
Okay.
And he may be on there, just not able to speak. He may be muted
Yes,
right now.
just away from the
They're going to get Jeff real
console.
quick.
Okay, for everyone's information, Mr. Miley is our representative who's been working with staff from Gravity Pad Towers LLC on this communication tower that they want to erect at the Air Center. Let's go ahead and have some discussion, and Scott, let us know if he responds to you,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
We looked at this last month, and I think had some questions. I noticed from what we saw last month, Mr. Patterson's been negotiating on both the rent, which is on page 32 of our packet, and the indemnification, which is on page 33. Those are two things we had a bit of concern about, so I don't know which one of you wants to go first.
I'll start just real quick. I'm texting with Sean Milks from Gravity Pad, and he says he's on, and he's speaking, but it's not coming through. So I'll start with that. I'm not sure what the issue is. He says he's muted.
Okay, so it's on our end that we're trying to fix it.
So with that, I think I'll just toss it to Mr. Patterson.
Okay.
He did most of the work between the legal meeting, so I'll let him talk.
All right,
Sure.
thank you.
And the changes are not, real complicated or significant. There was some discussion about the indemnification language, so what I did, and they agreed to this, was just completely strike that paragraph and add the indemnification that's in our boilerplate and just stick it in there. So I know that we can all feel hopefully better about that. And then there was also a discussion about the rent amount, and so what the concession that they have made is to increase the base rent, which was $850 up to should be $1,020 per month. And then the other concession they made was that originally they would pay 20% of rents from subleases excluding the first. But they have struck that, so they are going to pay 20% of all sublease rents to us. And so those are the two changes that are in there, and everything else should be exactly the same as what you saw last month.
Thank you.
And I believe we have Mr. Milks now as well.
What is this? Mills?
Sean Milks?
Mills?
Milks, M-I-L-K-S?
That's not what I had written down.
I'm here.
Hello, welcome
Hello.
to a very lengthy
Thank you.
Roswell Legal Committee meeting.
No problem. I've been definitely entertained, so I'm here to answer any question. Yeah, let's proceed.
Okay, we appreciate that, thank you. I'm not sure where we want to start with this. I'm going to ask the committee if they have any questions or comments on what we have before us now. Councilor Perry?
And I do. Thank you for joining us by phone. We appreciate your patience. And of course, we have our staff here. This is Councilman Perry speaking. I appreciate the work y'all put into making those changes. I to a certain degree, feel bad about my other questions that I continue to have, but please understand that these concerns arise because I'm looking at a lease that I'm not used to reading. And for the number of years that I've done this, I'm still not an attorney, and still don't have a legal degree by any means, and you wouldn't want to use me if I did, I promise. But when I'm not looking at something that I'm used to looking at and was part of putting together a number of years ago, it makes it, I'm a little reserved on adopting something that I don't have good, solid understanding of, I'm sort of hung up on that I have concerns about. I appreciate the fact that the company was willing to go up on the rent. I am concerned on the B portion of number 4. The rent will increase per term, effective as of each anniversary of the rent commencement date by an amount equal to 15% per 5-year term above the rent in effect immediately prior to such increase. There's no mention of a CPI consideration, and also, if it was done on a 3% or CPI yearly, that is a greater income than 15% every 5 years. And I know that we're not talking about exuberant amounts of money. I recognize and understand that, but it is, I'm used to, and with all of our other leases, well, I shouldn't say all, but we're trying to get very unilateral with this and making sure that all of them are matching up. I want to see that yearly percentage or CPI, whichever's greater. That's something that I think I want to see continue. I have concerns about the termination clause. It looks as if it makes that for the tenant, which if I was the one writing the contract for the tenant, of course, I would want this as well. So I'm not upset over it. I recognize the desire to protect yourself, but I don't see a lot of protection for the city in this. I know that it gives the consideration of default under Section 15, but even under Section 15, there's not a lot of resolve for the city. This is not a building. I would recognize it a little bit more if we were talking about a $28 million building going up on our facilities, bringing in 300 jobs. But we're not looking at the creation of jobs through this, or the creation of significant GRT or significant, anything through this. So I just have reservations, even though it's not a huge piece of property. I recognize that, and do I know what we're going to do with this? And we're tying this land up for a significant amount of time. I mean, you're looking at 7 extensions at 5 years apiece. That's 35. Add the 5-year. We're tying up land for 40 years. I just always get a little squirrely about tying the hands of another council. I promise you, Councilor Best, I will not be on this council in 40 years. Y'all can all be a sigh of relief. I will be gone one day. That just is a reservation. I just don't know what the air center is going to look like in 40 years. That's just concerning. But I recognize that as a business, they need it tied up as long as possible to justify the expenditures necessary to put up such a structure. So I recognize, but I guess with all of this that I'm saying, what I would really, really like to see happen, I go through here with Exhibit A, the description of the property, I have nothing. Description of the premises, I have nothing. Exhibit C, the environmental disclosure. Well, I've been on the council long enough to know that when that was a base, there was some problems out there, and I just get a little nervous about, some of these things when I'm not looking at a contract or a lease that I'm used to looking at. So by no means am I trying to say I don't want to do business with this company. I'd like to see us do everything we possibly can to bring this venture, because it's going to help our constituents. They've got cell phones, and we need them to be able to utilize for emergencies, and to be able to speak with their loved ones, and for those good things of life that we want to have here in Roswell. So I want this to happen. I just don't know that I'm prepared to agree with the terms we have here. What I think I would rather see is the potential of using our boilerplate, finding the areas which this company has reservations on, and go through those negotiations to find a resolve. And I guess I've said about everything I need to say right now.
Thank you. Counselor Foster?
I too have some concerns when what's presented with me with exhibits that are blank, agreeing to exhibits that are blank. And I know some of it is just boilerplate what they're going to be using with their tenants, but some of it is for us too, it looked like. And so that's kind of concerning. The other thing I have a concern, is there anything in here, I couldn't find it, that shows audited statements? I mean, we're going to get 20% of their customers' fees, but is there anywhere where the city is seeing audited financials from them?
I don't think there is at this time.
So then it's us just taking their word that, and not disputing, but the other thing I have that's a problem is technically they're taking our clients, our customers right now, because they're renting from us space for their antennas, and they're going to be now renting from them. Not that worries me that much, but truthfully, that's what's happening because of am I right?
Yes.
Mr.
and-
Sutton?
Yeah, the tower, my understanding is that the tower that those companies are on now, which is our tower, is coming down because it's old and structurally has to come down.
Correct.
And so that's where all this comes from, is a new tower needs to go up, and this company is prepared to do that.
And the other thing that I haven't asked this question, that's why it hasn't been answered, but the new towers that we put up, water towers, aren't capable of holding the cell structures, the cell towers that we have now?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I wanted to speak just real quickly to the exhibit the reason we don't have it in there is because the original placements of the two monopoles and where the fence lines go have not been completely worked out between Gravity Pad and our engineering department. And so we have some conflicts with where the fence would go, that type of thing, reference our retention pond and that sort of stuff with the tower. So basically, you're looking at the new monopoles, one going on the east side of the new tower and one going on the west side, pretty much right next to it, within a few hundred feet.
Okay.
So it's property that would not be leased for any other purpose.
Madam Chair, I
Please.
recognize that, but I still think that there are other issues that are just not answered for me. And Scott, I will apologize. There again, I'm looking at something I'm not used to looking at, so I'm not blaming anyone on staff. I recognize y'all work with companies and are trying your best to make things happen, and you can't always foresee what a stubborn counselor like Mr. Perry's going to do. And I'm surely not trying to be a thorn in the flesh. I just think that I know that if we're going to, if this committee and if this council chooses to work with this current lease agreement, an option agreement that's presented here, those concerns for me would have to be met for me to vote in approval, and that would be for that 3% yearly and CPI for consideration, and then a little bit better grasp of guarantee for us through termination. I just know we've got a few of those situations right now, one in particular, that we wish we could go back in time and fix. And and I know right now we don't think we would utilize any of that land for any other reason. We just don't know what things are going to look like in Roswell in 40 years.
Sure.
So not that I'm looking to, in 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, have them moving. Who knows? As far as I'm concerned, technology could change in 30 years, and this company doesn't even want the tower there anymore. We just don't know what those things are going to hold. So I think that those are just concerns that I have.
Okay. Any comments?
Is the gentleman on the phone, did he have anything to maybe, Mr. Milks, to communicate back to us about the comments?
Yes, sir. So there was quite a few things that were discussed. The first thing is the CPI. Typically, we don't enter into agreements with CPI because it has to be calculated every single time. But we're not opposed to that if that's truly what staff wants. So there's that. The reason it is at 15% per term is because that mirrors what the carriers are paying us. And it's also what the carriers were paying the city. And so we were just trying to keep it all uniform so that when we had our rent increased, you were mirrored and got the same, or would be getting the same increase. And so that's why we did what we did. The second part is what Stark talked about. You know, we're taking up space that really is not any leasable or usable space for another entity or another company. The water tank that's going up cannot sustain the wireless carriers for emergency services and for the new 5G that, is going to be broadcasting from this. And so going out 40 years, doesn't seem like a stretch to us because of how many devices people are utilizing in their everyday life. The cars and phones and tablets and laptops and, so much data being utilized. We just feel like, it's only going to increase and from, emergency services. So that is the reason why, and we feel that the new water tank is not going to be coming down in 40 years, just like the old water tank was up there for, I want to say, over 50 years. So, so that's why we feel confident and why we kept it all on the same parcel, knowing all of those items there.
Okay. Were there other questions that you wanted answered?
Well, I guess one question that I would have for Mr. Milks would be, I know that there's sort of, I recognize there's a time crunch, I get that, and there again, I'm not trying to be a thorn, but I just have to have good understanding and all this. Would there be the potential possibility, I guess I'm asking Mr. Milks and Mr. Stark here, of taking our normal lease, contract lease, and going back to the table? I'm not trying to ask, I guess I am asking, but at least we've got enough information that we're really not starting at the beginning, but taking what we are used to, what our attorneys have utilized for a great number of years, and work from it with this company to produce a lease that we can get through the council and confirmed.
I would have no objection in principle. It really comes down probably to Mr. Milk's timeline.
And I would say it's going to be a question of where the line is drawn, because this agreement as it is very different from the one that we typically use. For example, the option in the beginning is not something we normally have, just as an example. So as we would go, we would start with our boilerplate, but by the time we had worked through it, the result on the other side may be so different from our boilerplate that you still may not be satisfied, just as a warning.
And rightfully so, and I think I'll take that justifiably, I will. But I guess my concern is I don't want to create a precedence that we are, that we receive contracts from other people, because really this should be our contract. We are the landlord. We are the person. It should be our contract that a tenant is signing, not a tenant's contract that a landlord is signing. I don't want to set that and just and let that be a continual flow. Even if it does look different, I think me knowing that it came out of our department for the tenant to sign. Does that make any sense at all, Councilor Stubbs? I don't.
Does to me,
Okay.
yes. I have the same thoughts.
Okay,
Similar
that's,
thoughts.
I think, just in general, what I'm trying to get at. I recognize that, yeah, this is a bird of a different feather. This is not a T-hanger. This isn't, a bunker for something for storage. I recognize that, and it's going to have to look different. I think I do, but I think that it being our contract that attended as signing will make things much easier for this counselor.
And I would agree with that for 99.9% of the leases. I have no objection to that at all. That's my normal approach.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Counselor Stubbs,
Please.
a couple of questions that I have. I agree with Counselor Perry, but I also am, since this is a land lease, it's not, and they're putting something on the land, I'm willing to be more flexible, but I also know that there's a time constraint on this. Do we have a time when that, timeline on that old tower that, when it's coming down?
Yeah.
July 1.
Yeah. So, yep. So it's my understanding that the water tank is coming down in June, and just so council understands the situation, I personally, a native New Mexican, have built several sites in and around Roswell. And so the process usually takes around a year or so. I was informed by our clients the week of Christmas that we had to get a site on air and we hadn't started. And so, the contract and getting business terms approved at this meeting is imperative. And getting a contract that you're comfortable with signing is also imperative as soon as possible. We have to order materials. We have to start construction by next month in order to have all three carriers switched over to the new monopole and their FCC licensed frequencies being able to continue their service, because they have a legal obligation to the public for emergency services. They cannot come off the air. And so, it's bad enough if it's one carrier, but we have T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T scrambling, to make this happen. And I am personally taking that responsibility to make that happen. So if you want to use your lease, I'm fine, right? It doesn't matter to us what lease it is, but the language that's in the lease, which is important, most of what is in that lease that we gave you, because it was asked of us to give to you, has to remain. So but as long as you're okay with that, I'm fine with that. So it's going to make you comfortable, but so I just want everyone to understand the timeline and the time constraints, and it's imperative that we make this work as quickly as possible, because, again, there's going to be a lot of legalities from a federal standpoint if the site comes off the air. We absolutely cannot bring these sites off the air. So that's what I'm trying to avoid.
All right, so what I would like to propose, and one of the things that, I'm still even not clear. We've got two sites. Is this two sites? There's going to be two towers?
So it's two monopoles on the same parcel that the city of Roswell owns.
Okay, so it's
currently there's a 165-foot water tank. Okay,
right.
All the carriers are on it at roughly 150 feet. Okay, the new water tank that's being put up is also 165 feet, but it's beautiful, and we do not want to litter it up with antennas. Furthermore, we don't want to block it with a monopole. So the design that we came up with was having two monopoles on either side of it at 100 feet, which is lower than where the head of the alien starts.
All right.
And so this is very unique. This is extremely expensive. And this is something that I've never even seen before. But we're going to make it happen. But we're under, some very, very strict time constraints.
And I'm not an engineer, but my thinking is then that water tower doesn't create a shadow that if we have it on both sides? Is that the reason why we, okay.
Right, yeah. So
The water tower doesn't block the
sectors that
signal.
need, and so the one sector is blocking, and thus the need for the monopole on the west side of it.
Okay. So what I would propose, and one of the things that, like I said, that does bug me is not having exhibits that are blank and approving. I'm okay with making a motion to move this forward with knowing there's going to be some work done between now and April 8th. Now I'm doing the April 8th, 12th thing. Okay, April 8th. But like I said, if it comes to council with exhibits that are empty on spaces, then it's an automatic no for me, and I will be speaking out about everybody turning it down, because I don't like it. Yeah.
There's exhibits in Scott Stark's email right now from a local licensed surveyor showing the legal descriptions of each monopole, showing the legal description of the leased area that we are leasing for the ground space as well as access and utilities. So he has everything in there, and the next time you see this, you will also have it.
Okay, and the design will be there, and we can be able to see it. Because I'm okay with not actually seeing a picture, but sometimes other counselors would like to see the concept drawing or just an idea of what we're authorizing. And so with that,
Can we talk about just a little more?
yes, we can talk a little bit more.
And then I will
before
submit if you have a motion, but, and I don't mean to be unkind, I know I'm sounding like I am, I don't mean to be though, but if it's been known for some time, I mean, when I was on the council way back when, there was talks about the tower, about the need for the new tower, and there was, the communications and the going back and forth and trying to determine which one we would get. And then there was all the time that went into to ensuring the money, the financing for this new water tower and everything. I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's been an exuberant amount of time put into that this tower the water tower was going to come down. So my concern is I'm trying to understand we're really being pushed to make a decision because it's crucial, this time sensitive, but where was T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T? I'm starting to understand that sort of came to the picture in December for them to start pushing when, by the own admission, it's going, it's a year to get these in or whatever it is. So I always get itchy and nervous about being pushed into making a quick decision. Just been burned too many times with stuff like that before. I don't know that I have a problem if something can be taken care of between now and council time, but I think that what I would maybe prefer, Councilor Foster, instead of just making a motion and sending it on to full council, is we can have it placed on full council, or Joe can have it placed on full council, but to have a special legal committee meeting so that we can hear and understand and recognize for if there's anything else that can be dealt with, because I sure don't want to go through the time and it just goes straight to full council, and then me being Councilor Perry having, so I'd like to be able to have that opportunity. So if that could be a consideration, whether that's on the Tuesday before council meeting, whatever that is, that's what I would rather see. I'm trying to be amenable, but at the same time being protective if we can.
And that works for me, and that's making us be flexible enough to have another meeting. And then if so, there's no use in us having any motion on this, right?
Probably not.
Well,
Patterson?
if I may interject, is there a way that we can at least get a motion to finalize the business terms, so that all we have to do is have the attorneys work on the new lease from the city and ensure that all of the legal definitions and documentation is okay to approve? Is that something that we could do?
Let us look towards our council. I think they could do that anyway without us.
I'm not sure how to craft that motion, but I also am hesitant to do that because I don't think it's just a simple matter of lawyers haggling over boilerplate. There's quite significant disputes right now in terms of the term, for example. I think when parties have not had a meeting of the minds in terms of, is this going to be something that's going to go for 40 years without cancellation, or is the city going to have the power to cancel it? That's a legal matter, but it's significant. So I don't know that it's just a matter of saying the lawyers can hash it out.
Okay.
Joe, do you have, I see you started.
Since there was a discussion about another legal committee, I would just schedule the next legal committee within a week. You know, finance is next Thursday as well, too. Let's put legal on that same day, and then let us work some of the information on the boilerplate or whatever, and then we'll just bring it together. I think there's still plenty of time to get it onto the city council agenda if everything goes well, and then that way we don't have to worry about the semantics.
You could
How
make a
does the
motion to
committee-
set another legal committee meeting if that's the motion you want to make.
Madam Chair, I'm comfortable with that. And there again, please staff, I'm sorry. I really am. I sure don't like to cause problems, but at the end of the day, I got to vote on this, and I've got to know in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, that I've still made the right decision, the best that I could with the information I had. So, Mr. Milks, I do sincerely apologize. I'm not trying to be a thorn, but if we could give y'all a week to work with our council and get these things done, I think that I'd feel better. So, Councilor Foster, do you want to make a motion for
I just hate to make a motion that we're going to have a meeting on April Fool's Day, but okay.
the meeting of the mind?
Yeah, I just realized finance is meeting then too, so we might as well, all the fools meet together, right?
Call in the circus.
But, yes, I'll make a motion that we have a legal meeting to discuss specifically the telecommunication towers lease on April 1st at 4 o'clock.
I would second that.
Okay, any further questions, discussion, concerns? So the motion did say specifically to discuss this one item,
Yes.
right?
Correct.
Thank you.
But you as chair can always add to it.
No, I like it. It's fun. Okay, any further discussion or questions? Are we all okay? Okay.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All those in favor then of the motion of having a special legal committee meeting at 4 o'clock on April 1st, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries, so that's what we will do.
And if Counselor, it's April Fool's Day, if Counselor Best comes, we'll Send in the Clowns. How's that? I'm just kidding.
Okay, we appreciate everyone with that. Thank you very much. So we will be visiting this one more time. The next item we have on our agenda, it's our last item, action item, is the ambulance services agreement. And there have been quite a few questions on the content of the proposal that is not public information at this time. So do you want to make a presentation? Because I have a motion prepared to go into closed session.
No, I was just going to say that there we just had a complaint about blank exhibits, and the reason why there are blank exhibits in this one, there's a method to the madness. The procurement rules require that the technical proposal and the cost proposal are confidential until the document is actually signed. And so the discussion that I've had with the chair is that we could go into closed session to discuss it. The purchasing officer is here with copies for everybody to look at in closed session, so if that's where you'd like to go with that, conference room C is available.
Oh, okay, okay. So let me go ahead and make a motion if there's no question about that. All right, I move that the City Council Legal Committee go into closed session pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 1015-1H6, to discuss contents of a competitive sealed proposal for ambulance services. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Can we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Counselor Stubbs,
Yes?
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
and Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, we have a quorum, so, yeah, I've already invited Counselor Best to join us, and...
We would ask that the purchasing officer and Daniel Fuller be back there with us.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you all. We'll return when we return.
Do I need to take my drinks off?
Okay.
We got 60 people online watching.
Aw. Where's my? Okay, folks, for the record, the City Council Legal Committee is back in open session at 6:33. We had a closed session pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H6, to discuss contents of a competitive sealed proposal for ambulance services. No action was taken and no votes were cast. So we're back on the ambulance services agreement. Are there any further questions or comments from the committee? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to send to full council on April 8th for the regular agenda to consider recommending approval to the City Council for the ambulance service agreement with American Medical Response Ambulance Services, Inc.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to send the ambulance services agreement to full council with a recommendation to approve. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries. We'll see this on the agenda in April. If there's no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you all.